On Sunday morning of the 2013 Monaco Grand Prix, news broke of one of the most controversial Formula 1 sagas of the 21st century. It was a tale of secret testing, hidden identities and rules rows, one that ended with Mercedes being hit with a ban and that sowed distrust among F1's top teams. It's a complicated story full of fascinating details that played out very publicly. And it involved some of the biggest names in Formula 1, including Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg and Brawn, as well as raising questions about how the FIA handled the situation. And while it came to public attention at Monaco in late May, with the dramatic courtroom conclusion almost a month later, it all started much earlier in the season. Pirelli became F1's control tyre supplier in 2011 and had a rough time over its first two seasons, with widespread criticism, variously of performance, too much degradation, and at times late in 2012 of there being not enough degradation. Pirelli was optimistic heading into 2013, producing tyres with a new construction featuring a switch from Kevlar to steel belts, softer sidewalls and stronger shoulders. The expectation was that these tyres would give more feel, boost traction and produce the degradation levels demanded by F1. Instead, there was criticism from Red Bull in particular. The tyres were load sensitive and too easy to overwork. There were also safety concerns after a series of tyre delaminations early in the year, notably the two suffered by Ferrari driver Felipe Massa in the Bahrain Grand Prix on his way to 15th place, which followed a similar failure for Hamilton during practice. The weakness found by Pirelli was in the shoulder, which was failing after high temperatures caused by small cuts in the tyres. That's not cuts deep enough for a puncture, but the usual little nicks that tyres pick up when being run. Red Bull was at the forefront of lobbying publicly and privately for change, given it had to compromise its performance significantly to make the tyres last. Even Red Bull co-owner Dietrich Mateschitz made a rare intervention, saying the tyre management meant this has nothing to do with racing anymore. Pirelli needed to take action, both to fix the 2013 tyres and to ensure there was no repeat for the in-development 2014 rubber. But given F1 had an in-season testing ban and Pirelli had no car of its own for track running, this posed a problem. So Pirelli decided the best course of action was to use a little publicised clause in its contract to run a test using a current car and team. So it set up a test with Mercedes and its race drivers. The clause in question was Article 4.2 of its F1 tyre supply contract, originally signed ahead of its return to F1 for the 2011 season. This stated that Pirelli could conduct its own tyre testing with current competitors. Pirelli needed a front-running car, so approached Mercedes. It also got permission from the FIA for the test, sort of, we'll come back to that later, so scheduled 2 days of running to take place after the Spanish Grand Prix. This was later extended to 3 days, from May the 15th to 17th, because of rain. At the test, it racked up the allotted 1,000 kilometres. As always happens with tyre tests, Mercedes had no knowledge of the exact tyres it was testing at any given time and had to follow Pirelli's run plan. That was all in line with the contract, so that's fine, right? Well, not quite, because rival teams didn't hear about the test until after it happened. In fact, it only became known because it was mentioned in the Grand Prix Drivers Association meeting at Monaco. To add to the suspicions, Hamilton and Rosberg wore unmarked black helmets to disguise their identity. Mercedes later claimed this was because there were no security personnel present, although Mercedes lawyer Paul Harris QC later accepted it looked suspicious, with the benefit of hindsight. Given the circumstances, it was no surprise that what had happened became very public when F1 convened for the Monaco Grand Prix. On Sunday morning at Monaco, the world was looking forward to the race when the bombshell news dropped. It was a story I had the privilege of a front row seat for in the Monaco Media Centre that weekend because it was my then Autosport colleague, F1 newshound Jonathan Noble, who chased down and broke the news. Ferrari and Red Bull in particular were furious, so it was no surprise that, after the race, won by Rosberg, the two teams lodged formal protests. The protest wasn't targeting the results specifically, but about the wider implications. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner accused Mercedes of being underhand in participating in the test, saying, "What is wrong is that a team, in an underhand way, consciously tested tyres designed for this year's championship." Brawn and Mercedes denied it was a secret test and indicated it was down to Pirelli to inform other teams. What's more, Pirelli indicated the majority of the running was focused on 2014 tyre development, even though there was some 2013 work. And that was pretty much the argument. The FIA stewards, which included 9 times Le Mans 24 Hours winner Tom Christensen, held 3 hearings. In the first, they heard from Red Bull and Ferrari, and in the second, Mercedes. Unusually, Pirelli, which was not a competitor and therefore not under the jurisdiction of the stewards, was also summoned for a third hearing. The simple version of the arguments is that Ferrari and Red Bull claimed they were not invited to the test as they should have been, Mercedes said it was a Pirelli test and they had FIA permission to participate, while Pirelli said it had operated in accordance with its supply contract. Wisely, the stewards did not rule on this. Instead, they compiled a report to be passed on for a potential FIA International Tribunal hearing that could rule on the matter. A hearing was duly convened for Thursday, June 20th in Paris. Nobody disputed that the test happened, but there were many questions to be answered in the International Tribunal, effectively a trial of Pirelli and Mercedes with a wide range of potential penalties, many of which had possible championship implications. One of the first issues to resolve was whether Pirelli could be on trial at all. It argued it wasn't under the FIA's jurisdiction. That might have been true when it came to the F1 technical and sporting regulations, given it wasn't a competitor, but it turned out Pirelli had signed up to be bound by the FIA's International Sporting Code in its supply contract. The tribunal accepted that holding a tyre test was permitted based on the terms of the Pirelli contract. It was argued by rival teams, with Red Bull, Williams, Ferrari, McLaren and Marussia all making written contributions in advance of the hearing, that the sporting regulations prohibited this. However, the tribunal accepted the contention from Mercedes that it did not run the test. Pirelli did. Mercedes made the argument that as it was a Pirelli-run test, it was therefore not a competitor in the championship conducting illegal testing, so there was not necessarily a problem with the test happening. Both Pirelli and Mercedes argued they had FIA permission for the test, and this is where things get messy. It was established that Mercedes had twice consulted FIA race director Charlie Whiting, initially through team sporting director Ron Meadows and later through Brawn. Whiting gave his opinion that the test complied with the regulations, provided it was purely a tyre test. However, he also indicated he would check with the FIA's legal departments. That led to an email exchange between Charlie Whiting and the FIA legal director, Sébastien Bernard, being submitted as evidence. Whiting said that he believed this would be a Pirelli test, and Bernard agreed. However, Bernard said that Pirelli's supply agreements meant that it needed to invite all competitors to participate in such tests and be able at any time to demonstrate that it has done so. Whiting passed this on to Pirelli Motorsport director Paul Hembury. According to the International Tribunal verdict, Hembury confirmed that all the teams would be given a similar opportunity to test, and that he would confirm that all of the teams had been informed once that had been done. However, the tribunal concluded that it was common ground among all those involved that no other team was informed of the opportunity to carry out similar tests, that no other team was even informed that the Barcelona test was contemplated, and that no other competitor participated in or was present at this testing. And that was a big problem. Pirelli's argument was that the test was necessary and in the best interest of Formula 1. However, it said it was not feasible to have tested with more than one team. If teams other than Mercedes had been involved, the test would have served no purpose, and that if all the teams were given the opportunity to participate in tyre testing, it would have delayed it by months. Pirelli also contended that it was not responsible for the car supplied by Mercedes, a latest specification 2013 machine, and that the FIA had approved its use. It and Mercedes both argued no sporting advantage was sought or gained. There were also past examples of similar Pirelli tests, including ones using Ferrari cars in 2012 and 13, without inviting other teams that were not considered in breach of the regulations. However, the FIA had concluded at the time of those tests that they were permitted, as for example the 2013 Pirelli test conducted before the Spanish Grand Prix had used 2-year-old Ferrari machinery. The FIA contended in its written summary that the way the Mercedes test happened might constitute conduct prejudicial to the interests of the championship. That was aimed both at Mercedes for participating and Pirelli by running the test. But what really mattered were the conclusions of the tribunal. The tribunal accepted that the test was not carried out to gain any unfair sporting advantage, and that neither Pirelli nor Mercedes acted in bad faith. It also accepted that Pirelli and Mercedes disclosed to the FIA at least the essence of what they intended to do in relation to the test, and that Mercedes had no reason to believe approval had not been given. It also concluded that Whiting's actions were taken in good faith. However, it also deemed that Mercedes breached Article 22.4h of the sporting regulations, which banned in-season testing. It also found that while the FIA gave qualified approval, neither Pirelli nor Mercedes satisfied the condition that all teams should be notified and given an opportunity to test. And it was also concluded that the test wouldn't have happened had the FIA not issued the qualified approval it did. It was judged that Mercedes did gain material advantage, which potentially would lead to an unfair sporting advantage. This included reference to a confidential trackside engineering report that was emailed to Mercedes by Pirelli and branded of confidential sensitivity, which was proof that data was shared exclusively with it. The key conclusion was that this meant both Mercedes and Pirelli breached the International Sporting Code, notably Article 151 that prevents acts prejudicial to the interests of the competition. As a result, Mercedes was hit with a ban from participating in the young driver test held at Silverstone later that season. Pirelli was given a formal reprimand. The costs of the investigation and hearing were also split 3 ways between Mercedes, Pirelli and the FIA. Ferrari and Red Bull weren't happy with the decision given the tribunal had concluded that there was a sporting advantage. The feeling was that Mercedes being banned from the 3-day young driver test was not severe enough. Ferrari made its disappointment clear through its shadowy, anonymised Horse Whisperer column, which described it as perplexing to see that the guilty party got away virtually scot-free. But there was a sting in the tail. Pirelli's tyre troubles continued, coming to a head at Silverstone where Hamilton suffered a blowout while leading. As a result, Pirelli was given permission to revert to a tyre closer to the 2012 specification, and it was decided to allow the teams to trial the new tyre in the young driver test at Silverstone. And that's the test Mercedes was banned from, something Hamilton called unfair, but the rivals will have seen as poetic justice. Hamilton won the next race in Hungary anyway, although Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel went on to dominate the second half of the season and win a championship that was turned acrimonious by the secret tyre test controversy.